Well, what are we going to do? Wait to find out? You know, you have no choice. What are you supposed to do? So, too, if there's something that looks like a black widow, what are you going to do? Wait until the pest control comes in and does a clinical. You know, I see a shark in the ocean. Are you planning on eating me? If yes, I'll kill you. But if not, something pikuach nefesh. We don't know. So, but it's also this halachic approach falls right in line to what I received from the medical world, which is don't assume the worst. If someone can be paranoid about his health, you can you basically need to have 24 hours checkups to negate every single health issue that could be possible, and you won't have any life. And so therefore the position in the medical world is that think good, it'll be good. It's a very small percentage of people that actually have it, unless there's evidential, unless there's symptoms of something. Don't make an issue of something you don't assume to be an issue. And psychologically, being encompassed by the issue, the paranoia itself can cause damage the body.
It's never going to happen.
Right. So, right. So that's why the best thing is just to think good. But of course, to take precautions. But if it happens, that you're stuck. But in the case that there's no fire on and it's just gas, that is certainly a sakana. It's definitely dangerous, and you would have to turn it off. But they have today a lot of stoves that are built in with a safety feature that if there's no flame, then the gas won't leave. So that's fine.
This was a flame, and Friday night somehow I kept seeing it and bothered me. But then I woke up this morning and I thought, still here, nothing happened all night.
Right. Listen, it helps us do tshuva a little bit. Think about life. Pray to God a little harder. Okay. We're on the menu today. We are going to finish the subject of mourning customs. It's on? It's live? Okay. We're going to finish the mourning customs, the laws of Avelis, which we didn't have time to begin last week. So we're going to do, it's a short subject, Sphira Avelis period. And then we're going to continue with our, Woman Halacha series and I brought the book from this book, Halichos Basi. It's more famous in the Hebrew version, but you may recognize the English version as well. By Rabbi Yaakov Fuchs. Yitzchak Yaakov Fuchs from Yerushalayim. And he's not a Lubavitcher. It wasn't written according to the Alter Rebbe, but he's very universal and tries to include them. He's a halacha teacher in Beis Han in Yerushalayim. Okay.
Yeah, here it's normal. There it's impossible. Crazy.
Okay, I don't mind. Whoever wants to turn it off. Okay, so let's begin. During Sphira Saimer, we have two things going on. The first being Sphira. We discussed that in length last week. Anyone have any questions remaining on that? Sphira Saimer, the mitzvah counting Sphira? Okay, right. The main thing that we said is that even women should be counting, even if they haven't counted till today. They should be counting every single night if they've missed. And misconceptions regarding what's allowed or not allowed during this mourning period, being that we have another mourning period called Bein HaMetzarim, the 3-week period between 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, and a lot of people do Hekashim, Shabbos, comparisons and bridges from one to the other when they really are not meant to. So bottom line is like this. The mourning customs of Sphira Saimer are a lot more lenient, they're a lot less in number, and most of the things that we restrict during the 3-week period or 9-day period do not apply during the Sphira Saimer period. So we will go through different things and go through what's allowed and what's not. So first of all, regarding the reason, we are all aware of the Talmudic statement in the Sefes Yevamis, which states that Rabbi Akiva, became a Baal Tshuva. At 40, at 80, he became a big rabbi, and he had 12,000 students, pairs of students, for a total of 24. So they, 12,000, each one learned with a chavrusa, so there were a total of 24,000 students that he had, which is a huge network of students. And strangely, they all passed away in one period of time, says the Gemara, between Passover and Shavuos. They all passed away. Each one of the 24,000. He had not one student left, and then he would manage to get 5 more students, of which one of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi. Another one was Rabbi Meir. So he got 5 more students, as the Gemara lists, and from those 5 students, he reconstructed the oral Torah. So being that this was a major calamity, which basically destroyed the whole yeshiva system, we commemorate this by practicing certain mourning customs during the period of time. There's other reasons recorded as well regarding the mourning customs, as interestingly, the idea of mourning during Sfiras HaOmer is actually not Talmudically based. That's not written in the Talmud. The story of what happened to this is Rabbi Akiva is recorded, but there's no outcome or result of that story that's written. It doesn't say we do anything because of that story. It just says this happened. There's many stories in the Gemara. It doesn't say, but so we don't know exactly when the mourning custom started or who started it, who initiated it based on this. What we do know is that it's been around most likely from the time already of the Goldstein. Yes, not most likely. It's clearly at least from the time of the Goldstein that this was around, possibly prior, maybe from the end of the Talmud. As far as I don't know of any evidence prior to that time, but nonetheless, there are other reasons recorded as well of why we have mourning customs. One of the reasons is because there's a Gemara which states. The Gemara in Edis brings an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who stated that there's a certain time during the year that the Rishayim are mostly or mainly judged, meaning Gehenim is working overtime. I'm viewing it more like a washing machine that's cleansing the souls. So, just like in a washing machine cycle, they have the calm cycle, and then they have the shakes as if there's an earthquake going on. So in Gehenim as well, there's a period where it's doing an intensive cleansing process of the neshamas. And he says that intensive period of cleansing takes place between Pesach and Shavuos. Now, since the souls that are going through this, cleansing process called Gehenim are going through some tough times, therefore, us down here, we should accept upon ourselves some mourning customs which will help relieve some of their pain, which touches on a known concept in Avelis, brought in Sfarim, that in general by mourning, when we mourn for a relative, so it sweetens and diminishes the judgment for that relative in heaven, as we're accepting upon ourselves some of the suffering, right? In general, all the mourning customs are matters that are bothersome, not to take a shower, not to cut the hair. All these restrictions are bothersome to us, are a nuisance, and that pain switches the pain for the soul, and that's why it's one of the reasons why we mourn, for the 7 relatives. So, 1 second. So based on this, the reason for the mourning custom between Pesach and Shavuos is in order to diminish the pain of these neshamas that are found in Gehenna during this period. There's a third reason mentioned in the Achreinim, based on the Rishonim, and that is because the period between Pesach and Shavuos is the judgment over grain, and therefore, since it's Judgment Day, therefore, over the grain, which we live off grain, we don't work, and nobody here works in agriculture, right? But if we did, whether our field would grow grain or not would be a make it or break it for our livelihood, and let's be honest, we need grain to grow, even if we're not working in agriculture, as without grain, there's no food. We all know the story with the famine. And even in the modern world, one country has a famine, you just order from a different country. The grain anyway in Israel, most grain in Israel comes from outside Israel. So it's just an interesting fact to know. A lot of it comes from the U.S. It's grown outside Israel. But nonetheless, it's something that in the whole world is being judged at this time, and therefore, we sort of limit our pleasure in solitude with this judgment. Yeah.
So, if I understood correctly, the cleansing process is happening up there. So it's also happening down here, because we're counting the sphere. We're trying to.
Right. Well, we're when we count sphere, we don't go ouch. It doesn't hurt to count sphere, right? It's not painful.
But do you think there could be a cleansing process for us down here?
Of course there is, but it's a healthy cleansing process. It's a not painful cleansing process.
I thought Dafka cleansing meant that it has to be like you have to feel it. It can't be happy. How are you going to be cleansed if it's going to be happy?
That's the difference between this world and the next world. The next world, no pain, no gain. In this world, Hashem has other ways of refining. That's why it says 1 moment of tshuva in this world is worth more than the whole next world. As we're able to accomplish. Dal Teben Tanya gives the muscle with the shadow, that the move, one tiny movement of a shadow down here, upstairs, how much had to move for that to happen, for that shadow to happen, even though by here it's almost, you don't even pay attention to it. It's so little, it's so minute. Anyways.
Okay.
Okay, the Arizal puts this as follows when he discusses the mourning period, and he writes the following: that the purpose of the commemoration of the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva and the mourning customs that ensue due to it is in order so we distance ourselves from hatred, haughtiness, and fame, and rather acquire in ourselves attributes of love, humility, and peace. So he writes that the reason why the Chachamim eventually adapted this custom for Jewry is in order so we work on the aspects that cause the tragedy to happen to begin with. As we know, the Gemara says that it's because they didn't respect each other. What does it mean they didn't respect each other? What it means is that they were all students of Rabbi Akiva, they were all Talmidei Chachamim, but they weren't open-minded that there can be a possible other approach to understanding Torah, possible other approach for understanding Rabbi Akiva, the Rabbi, whatever. And so this intolerance didn't allow them to respect each other. And this is an issue that, ever since that time has never been cleansed from Jewry. And says the Arizal, we are meant to work on it during the period of Sfiras HaOmer. Work on, as he writes, hatred, haughtiness, fame, and acquire love, humility, and peace. The Rabbi dedicated a number of talks on this subject, saying the following: that there is you have certain dislikes within the religious community for those that are not religious. Not as much today, but certainly back in the day, and often this was even halachically mandated. We know the Gemara talks about the Am Haaretz. We know the Gemara talks about that a non-religious Jew, someone who's a heretic, the specific laws associated with them. Today, this has, with the Baal Tshuva movement and Shlichus and all that, this has really almost disappeared from the world, this dislike or hatred, and maybe still found in a few very select groups, without going into names. But the animosity within religious factions themselves, that unfortunately has never disappeared yet. And this is really the issue of Rabbi Akiva. That everyone here was everyone here was religious. Everyone here was Shomer Torah mitzvahs, but people had different interpretations and different approaches to it, and there was a lack of tolerance. And as the Rebbe clarifies a few points, there's no problem with, first, number one, holding differently than somebody else. Nobody has to feel threatened in their approach of Avodas Hashem or Judaism just because someone else has a different approach. Usually, human mentality is that if someone disagrees with us, we can't stop until we convince them to agree with us. Why? Just accept they don't agree with you. So they have a different view. We're not all the same. When you want them to say the same face as you as well, okay, so we disagree. As the saying goes, agree to disagree. Right? Agree to disagree. That you don't have to feel threatened. Really, it's the person feels threatened that maybe I'm wrong. So until he agrees with me, maybe I'm wrong. You can be right, and he can still think something else. You can still be right, and maybe that's right for you, and that's right for him. And obviously, there's a limit to this type of liberal philosophy. Let's say saying, well, he believes that you don't have to keep Shabbos, and I believe you do have to keep Shabbos. He interprets, thou shalt rest on Shabbos to take, to sleeping for 12 hours. It doesn't mean don't drive. It doesn't mean don't smoke. And I interpret it according to him. Obviously, that there's a limit to the liberal attitude, but and obviously that's just straight up, flat out wrong, and that's a big mistake. But here we're talking about, number one, is to understand that there are areas where there is legitimate room for disagreement, and unfortunately, when we see that people are trampling on other positions that have a legitimate viewpoint, even though it's not your viewpoint, this is the beginning of then causing not respecting each other. It is already brought in the Gemara. The Gemara says that why do we find that a lot of Talmidei Chachamim don't have children who are Talmidei Chachamim? The Gemara asks. The Gemara answers because the Gemara gives the following example. If I'm a blacksmith and another blacksmith moves to my community, he's my biggest enemy. If I'm a shliach and another shliach moves into my turf, he's my biggest enemy. If I'm doing something, and I need clientele, and now someone else is moving in, bring competition, this causes me then to speak bad against him. So it says the same thing to Talmidei Chachamim, that some, not all, of course, but some Talmidei Chachamim, they speak against other Talmidei Chachamim, and when everyone in the family hears this, so they think, oh, so Talmidei Chachamim are really bad people. So I don't want to be that. I don't want to be spoken against. It's the Gemara. It's the Gemara.
Wow.
It's not something of today. And so the first thing is tolerance for other approaches. Now, even if we believe that they are just completely making a mistake, they haven't seen the light, even so, we should have tolerance for people to be wrong. That's another level of tolerance. Number one is tolerance for people to have a different approach and lav dafka is mind the right way. Number two is tolerance for people to be wrong.
It's also a sin to talk bad about Talmud Chacham.
100%. Yes, it is. So this is the period of time of between Pesach and Shavuos is to work on this idea of learning to respect other factions and other groups and other people. And in general, it's unfortunately, this doesn't only begin. Children are more apt towards doing this because they don't have mature natures, but it's fed a lot of times from the parents at home. On a Shabbos table, a parent says something derogatory about another group. It's a terrible chinuch lesson for those children. Then what do you expect from the children? What do you expect to happen? So this is obviously something that has to start at home, and every parent must be very vigilant. And we've spoken about this in the past, that if we are present when somebody says this is a time to be quiet and it's a time to protest, you always have to be public smart. You have to use you have to have a lot of PR when you're in a public area or at a meal or etc. But there's some things that people have to understand they will not be tolerated. We will protest this. We will speak up against, someone saying something, and in order so it doesn't increase chas v'shalom and hatred or the kavod zalazeh. Someone who made a big tumult, a discussion about this recently in the past 6 months, is a philanthropist in LA. His last name is slip my mind. Anyone know who I'm talking about? He supports a lot of Lubavitch. He's Litvish. He supports a lot of Lubavitch Moses as well.
Starts with a name.
I don't know. He runs nursing homes in California. I don't know.
Used to be Beryl Weiss.
No, not Beryl Weiss. I'm not talking about Beryl Weiss. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So he is invited every year here in Eretz Yisrael to give a speech by Sukkot. He comes every year and he gives a speech by the annual Simchas Pesach.
Not Menlo.
No. But annual Simchas Pesach Shoeva, which has all the daily Torah, there and thousands of students. So this year he spoke about this subject. And he said, you can listen to it. It's online. It's just, I don't know where I'm on. Maybe it's on Yeshiva. I think it was on Yeshiva World News. They had the whole speech over there. It was in English. I think it was in English. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was in English. But basically he spoke about this exact point of how, we have families or even Rosh Yeshivas that are standing up and preaching and speaking negatively about other groups. He was talking more about this in the, there's been a controversy in the Litvish world for the last 5-10 years over a certain subject.
But I find that Lubavitch is always being negative towards the misnagam.
So what we're saying is not, if the shoe fits, wear it. Okay, so this applies to everyone. No one can claim a license. We have the license of negation. We have the license of bigotry. We have the license of speaking bad. Just the opposite. Lubavitch is the prime idea of Lubavitch, obviously. So certainly we have to be the most careful in this. And the fact that maybe people that aren't doesn't change the philosophical approach that should be adapted.
Too much.
But he spoke over there about this point and how this is something terrible. This is like the way he worded it, it's like a cancer that's been growing for years and no one has ever spoken about it. No one has ever approached it to try to fix the issue. And then he said, and I'm letting everyone know right now, any yeshiva or moisad or kollel who does this and takes my money that I donate, they are ganovim, they are stealers, they have no permission to use my money. I do not intend to donate to them one dime. And anyone who does this as a policy, if someone slips, like, hey, we're not angels, but this is a very interesting speech that he gave. Okay. So now time people are standing up to this. Okay, let's get moving now on with the different halachas. So even though the Gemara says that they died between Pesach and Shavuos, the tradition is they actually only died within 33 days. Okay, the question is which 33 days. So if we're mourning because of those deaths, obviously we shouldn't mourn the whole time because between Pesach and Shavuos is 49 days. So we only have to mourn for 33 days within those 49 days. The question is which 33. So because this is obscure, we have practically about 7 different customs. Now, interestingly, the Sephardim have one clear custom that they keep, so they have one custom. But Ashkenazim, there's about 6 different customs of what's done. Sure, they do. Absolutely, sure. Oh. Everyone, Ashkenazim say the students were Ashkenaz, as far as the students were Sephardi. So everyone, nobody wants to say, they weren't. Everyone wants to say that it was them. That was a joke. And anyway, but yes, they do. They absolutely do more. They absolutely do more. So what is the mourning period? So Tosfos holds actually that the days of death were all the days of Tachanim weren't said. All the days Tachanim was said. Any day that Tachanim wasn't said, no deaths occurred. So let's see, Rosh Chodesh, he says there was a break. Pesach Chol Hamoed, no deaths occurred. Starting from the day after Isra Chag, the first deaths occurred. Came Rosh Chodesh, the deaths stopped. Came Lag BaOmer, the deaths stopped because once the Tachanim, all the days of Tachanim wasn't said, that's when the deaths didn't occur. And if you do the math, it ends up being about 33 days of Tachanim days that the deaths did occur in. Yeah. And that's proof, by the way, that the Tosfos held that you do have to say Tachanim the day that the tzaddik passes away, because if you held like the Chassidim who don't, there'll be no days left for them to die, because you don't say Tachanim in any days. Always another tzaddik that passed away. There was another yahrzeit. Anyways, so. But nonetheless, nobody actually keeps this custom that they only mourn on days of Tachanim, and when there's no Tachanim, they don't mourn. The customs are the following. The Sephardi custom is that they keep mourning from after Pesach, because nobody keeps on Pesach. It's holiday. So starting from after Pesach until Lamed Daled BaOmer, the 19th, the 19th of Iyar. Yeah. So interestingly, they don't cut their hair on Lamed BaOmer. They don't do weddings on Lamed BaOmer. Maybe they listen to music because it's a day of Tachanun and Simcha, but they don't marry or do haircuts and the like. Okay, that's until the morning of the day after Lag BaOmer. Ashkenazim, so that's Sephardim, that's what they do. That's the opinion of Mechaber and Shulchan Aruch, and no one argued on that, and that's really what all the Sephardim do. By Ashkenazim, as the Ramah brings, there's many different customs. We'll go through a list of the customs, and then we'll say what Chabad does. So some have the custom from doing it the 33 days from after Shavuos, from after Pesach, just like the Sephardim, but until the morning of Lag BaOmer. Okay. Others do till the night of Lag BaOmer. It's 2 different customs. One does till the day, one does till the night. Others, and this is also very popular, this next one amongst Ashkenazim, is to start the customs from the second day of Iyar. So a lot of people only started last week, the morning custom. So they would get married, and you may have gotten an invitation from getting married until Rosh Chodesh Iyar. That's following the Litvish custom. Ashkenazim, yeah. Not there's 6 Ashkenazi customs. Some Ashkenazi.
Wait, from second day of Iyar till when?
So they do. So there's 2 different customs. Some do from the second day of Iyar until the Erev Shavuos, and others do from Rosh Chodesh Iyar, meaning the 30th of Nisan, until the 3rd day of Sivan. The 3rd of Sivan. The only time that all Jewry is keeping mourning customs, because it's overlapping for everyone, is between the 2nd of Iyar and the 17th of Iyar, which is the period we're in right now. So this period, everybody's keeping. Now, the Rabbanut of Israel, they follow the more strict approach. I believe they don't do until Lag BaOmer. That's their position. Even if you're Ashkenazi, they won't do it until Lag BaOmer, I'm pretty sure. I know they have specific regulations regarding this, because it's difficult to bounce between the different denominations. Well, my friend was able to get married, why can't I get married? What is this? So I think they just have, that's what I remember looking up in the past. They just have a clear rule that they don't do marriages during this time. Chabad. So Chabad takes the cake in this one, as we are accustomed, even though this isn't recorded in any literature, but this is the tradition. We are accustomed to just say, you know what, everyone's arguing, we're just going to do the whole thing. So we do all 49 days, excluding holiday. We do all the period.
My friend who's Lubavitch, but maybe her daughter isn't, her future son-in-law isn't. She's getting married on Lag BaOmer.
Right. So recently, meaning recently, in the past 30 years, it's become a custom of Lubavitch to get married during Lag BaOmer. Yeah, that's true.
Really?
But originally, we weren't accustomed to get married Lag
wow.
BaOmer. Originally, there was no marriages in Chabad from before Pesach, meaning from Erev Pesach until after Shavuos. There were no marriages.
Yeah, in fact,
But with the generations, the Rebbe said basically that delaying a wedding today is not so simple. So we don't have the same purity of mind and body as we used to. So we have to take that into account when we want to follow certain stringencies.
How about engagements?
Engagements are never a problem. You can get engaged during the... Okay, so let's go through what the restrictions are. But going back to that point, but basically, based on what we said, is that the Chabad custom is to be stringent until Erev Shavuos. So we follow, because that's when the last opinion says till Erev Shavuos. So we actually follow mourning custom till Erev Shavuos throughout the whole period. Okay, so regarding weddings, that's one of the main things that we prohibit during the mourning period. There's only a few things. It's one of them is we don't get married. However, engagements are 100% allowed, and you can even do an engagement, party with a feast. That's not a problem. Dancing is a problem. We'll discuss that next. But the actual meal, celebratory meal for engagement, is not a problem.
How about God forbid?
Even halachic engagement, by the way, is allowed. Let's differentiate that. It used to be that people would do first kedushin, which is the ring, and only later would do the chuppah. And this was done in order to basically, already you got her, right? Solidify the marriage. She's my wife, but we don't actually live with each other until another year passes. There are still some small pockets of Jewry that do this today, but 99% have abolished it because of the worry that she may not be faithful in that year.
I thought the yichud made the actual marriage. It wasn't the
chuppah and yichud. There's a few things.
Yeah, so you're missing the yichud if you're not having.
You're missing the chuppah. You're missing the yichud.
Yeah.
Correct. That's why there's not nesuin yet.
Okay.
It's just erusin, and that's why they're not allowed to be intimate.
Okay, got it.
Because you need to have erusin and nesuin.
Right.
So Sephardim get married after Lag BaOmer, right?
Yes.
Now, can the Lubavitch go to that wedding?
Okay, very good question. Let me just finish with this point of kedushin. So the point is that even though we said you're not allowed to get married, but even halachic kedushin, which today we do anyways only under the chuppah, is technically permitted, because it's only the simcha of the actual nesuin. The main simcha used to be only by the chuppah, by the yichud, by the chuppah, when he would take her home to his house, not by the the ring, putting the ring on her finger. That was like a small ceremony people watched. They said Mazel Tov, and she went away for a year. That's how it was. That's how world Jewry had marriage customs for most of Judaism. It's only recently that this has been changed. Recently, maybe in the past, 500 years, 600 years. But that's allowed, and the reason why that's allowed is a concept that's recorded that is that someone else may marry her in the interim, which is the concept that's brought in a number of areas. Also, Cholmaid, you're allowed to get kedushin done. And what's explained is that even though in heaven they already decided, right, everyone has a predestined spouse, this individual marry this individual, that's what we're pushing to happen. But can that decree be broken? It's possible. And that's why, because otherwise you just say, what are you worried about? No one can marry her if she's meant to be yours. And if they do, it means she's not meant to be yours. No, it is possible for someone to intercede and marry her first. Like we know, for example, David and Bathsheba. Bathsheba was the zivug of David. They were the basharets for each other, the half souls, the other half. But because of David doing something, it caused that he lost the first dibs on her. And that's why she married Uriah first. So we see that it's not so simple to say, oh, well, when the girl who's meant to come will come, I'll get married. It doesn't work that way. You have to be proactive, and you have to try to hurry things up because she may get taken with someone else.
How about a get? God forbid, can a person give a get on these days?
Yeah, sure.
Well, because I thought it was like a simcha, so.
A get? Well, maybe for some, unfortunately, for some women, it's a simcha. I agree with you. But usually a get should be something very unfortunate.
Right, for sure.
But no, a get, we even on Shabbos, we allow to incarcerate a runaway get giver in order to force him to give a get.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
On Shabbos.
Incarcerate. I said incarcerate.
Yeah, but still, wow.
Yeah, because it's very serious. What do you mean? A woman could be left in laguna for who knows how long.
Nothing.
It's not.
God forbid. It's true.
God forbid. Unfortunately, it happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so another point over here is that from the letter of the law, the prohibition of getting married is only if you already have children. But someone who doesn't yet have, a man who didn't yet fulfill his mitzvah pruvu of having a boy and a girl is actually allowed to get married during Sfira Saymer, which would mean that 90% of marriages are really allowed to be taking place during Sfira Saymer. But we don't do it. Why don't we do it? We don't do it because it's a tradition that there is a danger for the marriage to do so during this period. In other words, even though something may be mutter according to halacha, the day of the wedding is a very important day, a very auspicious day that can affect the rest of your unity together. And to do it at a time where, there was discord, gvuras is very bad ingredients for the future marriage. And that's why practically we don't do it even when it's halachically allowed.
Makes sense.
Okay, so regarding attending someone else's wedding, that's this is their period and they're allowed to. Let's say Svardim, they're getting married. Can they attend a wedding taking place on Lag BaOmer? So the answer is
after Lag BaOmer.
Chabad, can we attend? Right, because we're mafim, right. So certainly for us, it's for sure less of an issue because we're just doing a chumrah. We don't say that you have to keep mourning the whole period. So technically, we've already kept the mourning period. So it's just a chumrah. But nonetheless, even by others, let's say Reish Chodesh Iyar, there was a wedding taking place by a Litvish couple. So the answer is to attend the chuppah is allowed, but to attend the feast and the wedding is a problem. To attend the actual wedding feast and music and dancing and eating, that's a problem, unless you're a very close friend or relative. But if you don't show up, they may, it could spoil their mood or make them be upset. In that case, we permit it because you're part of their mitzvah. You're helping fulfill their mitzvah.
If you're a close relative.
Yeah. If it's, if your presence with a C, right, not with a T, if your presence will be missed, then you can show up. But if your presence will be missed, then just send presents and you don't have to come. Okay, another one of the regulations is regarding dancing. So it's prohibited to dance during this period. Each one according to their mourning period. As I said before, Chabad follows the entire mourning period. And regarding a Sudas mitzvah, let's say like a bar mitzvah, a bris milah, there is a machlekes in Paiskim. Some say it's mutzah, some say it's not. Different communities do different things. You will see some communities that they will have dancing by bar mitzvahs during this period, and others don't. And this is a difference in opinions in halacha of whether we extend the mourning custom even to a mitzvah occasion or we don't.
Why is there a heter for people that are depressed to listen to music and not have to mourn?
It's not a heter. They're not listening to music to be happy. They're listening to music for medical and therapeutic reasons. All the mourning customs, even mourning for a relative, is only to not indulge in displeasure, but something that I need as medicine, something that I need in order to just get back to normal.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it for pleasure. So if I got my hand dirty with mud, I'm allowed to wash my hand even on Tisha B'Av. Because I'm not doing it for pleasure. I'm doing it to remove the dirt.
Wow.
So anything that's done to stop a negative situation is permitted to be done. It's not considered an indulging of pleasure.
Excuse me, I didn't catch what you said about I have a bas mitzvah coming up for granddaughter, and in 2 weeks.
Okay, Mazel Tov, first of all.
I think they're having it after Lag BaOmer so they can have music because they keep it.
Right. So if they're doing after Lag BaOmer, then obviously they can have music. That's not a problem.
Yeah,
but you're asking theoretically.
What about me?
Well, yeah, you're the grandmother. Your presence, both types, will certainly be missed, and therefore, you can for sure show up and join. As I said before, it's just a chumrah for us to extend it till Shavuos. So certainly in this situation, and since some poskim say that a bas mitzvah is like a sudas mitzvah today. So especially if there's divrei Torah taking place and everything, so there's definitely no problem in participating, and they can have music. In general, though, the concept of bas mitzvahs, you can go online. I have a whole article on it. I was just reading it up. how it started, who it started. It was Reform started bas mitzvah. It's a Reform concept, but made its way into Jewry and into Orthodoxy, and today we've adapted it. Okay.
Somebody brought you water, Rabbi, if you didn't.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Well,
Amen.
Okay, regarding music, so even though I mentioned earlier dancing, now even though they sort of go together, like ever see people dancing with no music or singing? It's kind of strange.
Apollo people.
Yeah.
No, right. I'm saying nothing. So let's talk about music.
Without music, you can dance.
No, dancing is the main issue in Shulchan Aruch. Music is the subcategory. The main issue is the dancing.
So bar mitzvahs without music.
Again, if you hold that a Sudas mitzvah, there's no set thing in Chabad. Depends on the Rav. The Rebbe was not based on the testimony of Rabbi Gruner, was not for dancing with music by simcha occasions. Rabbi Gruner testified that the Rebbe sent him on Matzei the Rebbe sent him on the afternoon of Lag BaOmer to go around the halls in Crown Heights and ask the Bala Simcha to stop the music from playing once it's Shkia, once it's sunset, and that's certainly a Sudas mitzvah. It's a wedding, and it started beheter, so this is a huge chumrah.
Yeah.
So definitely. Based on that testimony, the Rebbe took a very stringent approach to this. But again, as I said, this is a split. It's no Chabad, not Chabad. Different people do different things.
But for exercise, I'm sure you can.
So let me just talk in general about the Isra of music. So the Isra of music is not recorded in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's a tradition that's just all these mourning customs are what I just said, customs. None of them are Talmudically based. So having an argument here, it doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch I can't listen to music, is quite weak, because all of these things are customs, and therefore if the custom is not to listen to music, it has the same level of strength as do any of the other mourning customs we keep during Sfira. And that practically is the custom. We don't listen to music, whether it's recorded or live. But a cappella music, the custom is to be lenient to allow it, so therefore it's not a problem. Because again, the whole Isra is based on custom, but there are communities who are accustomed to be stringent, even running a cappella, and they even avoid singing, except on Shabbos, but they generally avoid even singing. Each community is to do like their custom. That's not a problem. Same debate of dancing is also with music. We're running a bar mitzvah, bris milah, and things of the like. Can you have dancing, music? So it's the same debate that we mentioned earlier. And regarding practicing music during Sfira, it's a problem unless you do it for parnasa purposes. As we say, when you do it for parnasa purposes, it's not simcha. You're working. You're doing it to work. It's for a job. So it's not considered simcha. So that's mutter to be done. So that's why, let's say, a Lubavitcher musician, there's a lot of play for a Litvischer wedding. There's a lot of play for weddings taking place after Lamed Gimel, after Lag BaOmer. As we said before, so as someone who needs for emotional or mental health, then music therapy is permitted for them, because it's a therapy, it's a medicine, it's not something you're doing for pleasure. So to someone who's driving late at night, in a highway, and after 10 minutes of driving on a boring road, the eyes start drifting. Very, very dangerous. So you can blast on some terrible music that you really hate, and that'll keep you up for the next, or music that you really like, and that'll keep you up, whatever it is. Obviously, that's allowed. That's to prevent a real sakana situation. It's not a problem. For exercise, there's a nice precedent to allow playing music for exercise purposes, so it can help me move, add adrenaline. Once again, you're doing it not for the excitement or joy, you're doing it just to be able to help you stay in shape, be healthy. So that also has the precedent of that is regarding that in general, the Talmud writes that since the destruction of the temple, you're not really allowed to listen to music. But it says that those who, but the malachim with a ches is not kings, but are sailors. So just imagine you are, there's no motor, there's no engine. You are the sailor, with the rows, rowing this boat. It's very hard work. Those sailors have to be very powerful and strong. Imagine you having to do this for 3 hours straight. So what keeps you moving? They would have music. They would sing music. They would have music. Or have someone play music for them in order to keep them with their energy. So it says it's motive for them to do. So that's a precedent that when you have music for the sake of work, it's not a problem. There's no problem in having festive meals during the period of Sfira Sa'omer. even for non-mitzvah purposes, so that's never an issue during Sfira. Regarding haircuts, so as we know, one of the major customs is that we don't cut our hair. This refers only to hair of the no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The prohibition applies to all body hair, not just hair of the head. It applies to all body hair. On Chalamayid, the prohibition is only to head hair. B'Shchaydish, the prohibition is only to head hair. During mourning periods, whether it be for a relative or Sfira or 3 weeks, the prohibition is on any body hair, with a few exceptions. Exception number one is for women who do it for beauty purposes, for the husband, etc. Girls who are on shidduchim, it's also mutter. If it's being done for tznius purposes, it's mutter. Men are allowed to trim their mustache to avoid it getting in the way of food. So those are a few exceptions recorded, but in general, all other hair outside these exceptions are prohibited from being cut during the mourning period. Now here we have a special ruling of the Arizal based on Kabbalah, not to cut hair even outside the mourning period, meaning that this minhag should be adapted throughout the entire 49 days. Even if you keep these specific days of mourning, this has nothing to do with mourning. The Arizal says is that another reason for not cutting hair is because hair is gvura, represents severities, and the whole period between Pesach and Shavuos is a time of gvura, and therefore we don't want to add to the severities by cutting our hair. That's what he writes, and therefore, so you have many people who, Sephardim especially, who avoid cutting hair throughout the entire 49 days, even though they've ended officially their mourning on the morning after Lag BaOmer. Nonetheless, regarding hair, they don't cut. This is also the Chabad custom. We raised it before. We anyways keep the mourning customs till Erev Shavuos, but all the more so regarding hair cutting, we don't cut the hair till Erev Shavuos.
Do we talk about buying things yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Coming up. This issue of cutting hair, that's the general rule, but there are cases of exception, cases of need, like, if someone got a bad haircut, and he needs to get it fixed up, then obviously he doesn't have to look like a fool, be a laughing stock, give simcha of laughs to the whole community every time he walks outside. He's allowed to fix his hair in that situation. Medical treatment, someone who has lice, any of these cases permitted. Someone who has to have a meeting with a government official or a business meeting, he's going to lose money if he looks like like Tarzan. So he's allowed to. In those cases, those are cases of exception where we do give a heter for hair cutting. Regarding children, so we do apply it even to children, even children below the age of chinuch. We do not cut their hair, with exception, of course, to Lag BaOmer, when we cut it for an upsharnish purpose. That is the minhag. Any hair cutting questions? Okay. We're going to now deal with other customs that are not recorded in the Shulchan Aruch, but some have been adapted and some not. We'll discuss what the status of them is. Number one, regarding moving homes during Sfira. So you have some places who say it should not be done. You shouldn't move during Sfira, meaning that if you have ability of pushing off your move, your lease, your rent till after Sfira, then that's what you should do. Or initially, you shouldn't arrange for your lease to end during Sfira period, and then you have to move during Sfira. And the reason is because when a person moves, their mazel changes, and we want our mazel to change in an auspicious period, not in a period where the mazel needs some help. But nonetheless, some say there's no problem at all, and there's no issue at all with moving during Sfira. But so this, in the case of need, certainly it may be done. There's no restriction against cutting nails during Sfira at all, so you can cut nails regularly during Sfira Seimer. Regarding swimming or going to the beach or traveling, once again, no issur whatsoever on these things. They're 100% mutter. Some are accustomed to avoid doing so due to danger. So, that's fine, and that's even suggested. Let's say, you go to the Kinneret. It's one of the most dangerous beaches in Israel. Different things of sakana, so that should be avoided. But, to swim in your pool, what's the sakana of swimming in your pool? It's not like 3 weeks. It's not a problem at all to go swimming during that time. So to traveling, there's no problem in traveling if you need to. Regarding Shechianu, so it's permitted to say Shechianu during Sfira. We don't find any prohibition. However, there are many places who record a custom of not doing so. And practically, you have different communities do different things. You have some who say Shechianu, not a problem. You have others who don't say Shechianu at all throughout all 49 days. And you have others who say only on Shabbos, but not during the week. That is practically the Chabad custom. We don't say Shechina during the week. And on Shabbos, we do say Shechina. This is different than the custom of the 3 weeks, in which we don't say even on Shabbos. The reason of why we and others are, abstain from Shechianu is because in the wording of the blessing, we say, thank you, Hashem, for bringing us to this time. And if it's a time of mourning or severities, it's not really such a great time. So, it doesn't really befit the blessing. So therefore we avoid saying it. Regarding buying new clothing or wearing new clothing, not a problem at all. You're allowed to buy new clothing and even wear new clothing. However, some are accustomed to be stringent. Number one, because technically when you buy new clothing, you're supposed to say Shechianu, and some people avoid Shechianu. Therefore, they also don't want to buy the clothing. Also, there's some happiness and joy, associated with buying new clothing, especially with women, as we know. And right, it's halacha to buy her clothing or jewelry for the Chag. So that's another reason why some avoid it. But once again, from what law, it's completely mutter, and therefore, if there's a sale, if you want to get something, you can go ahead and get
and even wear it.
And you can even wear it, yes.
Chabad holds that.
And there's no setting in Chabad, different Bana pass in different ways.
Okay.
My opinion is that if you have a family tradition that that's what you've always done to be machmer, so you should respect that.
Okay.
But in the case of need, you can go ahead. And if you didn't have such a family tradition, then you don't have to adapt it at all. Zalman Shimon Dvorkin was of the opinion that there's no problem of wearing or buying new clothing during Sfir Saimer. Buying new things, new items is not a problem at all during Sfir Saimer. There's no restriction on that. And that closes up all the recorded customs. Any questions? I can be happy to take them.
I'm going shopping after class.
Stop.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you. Good.
So the husbands were so happy they get 49 days. They don't have to worry about the credit card.
Well, that's why my husband told me you
credit
can't
card
buy anything during these days. I'll have to tell him what you said.
Okay. Okay, so what this was just temporary. We did these halachas, just halachas of the day. We're now going to continue our course that we were in the middle of laws pertinent to women. So again, this sefer, it's available for purchase. Whoever wants to, you can purchase it. I think it's available for purchase. I actually don't know. I mean, I have one, so I'm assuming it was purchased. So there's a Hebrew version that's more popular. It's a black book, Halichos B'Yisrael, same name. So those of you who want the Hebrew version, you can get that. That for sure stores here carry. The English version, I don't know if stores carry. But this we're going to be using again as just the general guide for different topics. We're not always going to paskin the way he writes. I'm going to give out the different approaches and what the Alter Rebbe rules for.
This is Fuchs, right?
Yes. He wrote a very popular a book, Tefillah Halacha, Tefillah Hilchasa, on davening, on prayer, and he also wrote a kashrus book. It's called Sefer HaKashrus. He came out, I think, 15 years ago and became a very popular. It's a black book. I think it was translated also into English, and one of the best. It's the most popular encompassing kashrus book that's out there today. He did a great job. Not, as all books of Malach, and sometimes the accuracy needs some help, but in general, he did a very.
My mashgiach told me that for halachas, for pertinent to women, that I didn't have to go by Chabad book necessarily. She said you could just and if you have questions, you can ask me. My mashgiach said that.
If you have, obviously halachas belong to Rabbanim. If you have a question, if you follow Lubavitch rulings, and obviously if there's a Lubavitch book available with Chabad rulings, that's what you should get.
But you don't have, if there's
no. If you don't, you're going to get confused.
She told me that.
I don't know. I can't take responsibility what other people have told you, but what I can tell you is that every person should follow their denomination. So I would never tell a Sephardi, it's not a problem for you to use Shemir Shabbos Kilchas at the Paskin. No, of course not. You have to use
it's completely different.
Of course, there's different rulings for Sephardim and Ashkenazim. There's different rulings for the Alter Rebbe has different opinions and different things. So those who accept the Alter Rebbe's psak, it's also for them to belittle it and be lenient, even if there's another great place who says something different. Each to their own. But there isn't yet that I know of a something in comparison to this book, and that's why we're using it. Okay. Okay, so the subject we were up to, if you remember, we had just finished reviewing women's obligations of prayer. Okay, that's what we left off with. So I'm going to give a quick review of that so we can step up from there and continue from the different things. So we spent a lot of time dissecting each section of prayer. Who was here by those classes?
Yeah.
Remember?
I remember.
Okay. So we spent a long time dissecting the different sections of prayer and their relevance to women and why some are not pertinent in different disputes. I want to just give a general summary of all that, of what practically we said women have to say.
Right.
So what we said was that the lechatchila, a woman that has time, she's not taking care of kids, she has the ability, she should either she's before marriage or after marrying off all the kids, she should be davening the entire prayer every single day, just like a man, no difference, except tachanan, which some say, some don't say.
Didn't you say don't, Marv?
No, Marv, we said women don't have to ever do. They don't want to.
Okay.
We'll get to Marv. So, but that's the chatchila, and in a time of need, so we said that this would be the crunch prayer, the abridged version of women in a time of need. Even if you are before marriage or, after kids and everything, if in a time of need, this is necessary, this is what you can do as the minimum requirement. So we said that we said the following. We said that you would say of course, Birchas HaShachar, Birchas HaTorah, all those blessings in the beginning. Then you would skip to Parshas HaTamid, which is that one paragraph of talking about the day of Rabbi that was brought, right? That small paragraph. You would skip from there and to Shema Yisrael. Then you would just Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, that's it. Then you would go and say Emes V'Yatziv Nachum, which is right after Shema, until the blessing of Gal Yisrael, and then you would begin Daven Shemona Esrei, and it's over. That's the abridged version of the minimum that every woman is chayiv to daven. We said this is according to the Alter Rebbe's rulings. Those who follow the Mishnah Berurah, like Litvish, so they hold that also Psuka de Zimra they have to daven. So they also say Psuka de Zimra at least Baruch Shamar, Ashrei, and Ishtabach. We mentioned that according to many Sfardim, they hold that they're not allowed to say Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach, and they're not allowed to say Birchas Kriya Shema, because it's a bracha l'batala for their opinion. Because women aren't obligated, so if you're not obligated to bracha, they hold you can't say the blessing. So we said that some of them say that some of them hold that they don't say it with the blessing. This is a review. We went through this in length in the previous classes. If you probably don't follow the weekly Sephardi Shabbos, pamphlets that are put out, but there's two of them that come out every Shabbos. One of them is by Rav Mazuz, or Meir Mazuz, and the other one by Rav Yitzchak Yosef. Yitzchak Yosef is the son of Vad Yosef. He's the chief rabbi, the Sephardi chief rabbi. Rav Meir Mazuz is a very famous Sephardi posek. And they often represent the two opposite sides of the Sephardi world and Sephardi opinion. So it's just interesting every week. Somehow they always end up talking about the same subjects but opposite opinions. Like maybe they talk about this beforehand, so each get a chance to rebut each other. It's very interesting. Every single week they go back and forth. But this comes out two of the most popular Shabbos pamphlets of Israel. So regarding this, they're also split regarding this subject as well. There's many subjects that they split on, and which is legitimate. That's fine. Just saying that this is something that they also discuss, whether a woman is allowed to daven the whole davening normally or not. But for Ashkenazim, for sure you could, as we said already before. And we also discussed in length regarding Zman Tefillah that unlike the misconception, there was no extra leniency or extension of Zman Tefillah given for women over men, and it has the same laws. So therefore, as we said before, Shachris, you can only daven until Chatzos. The latest, initially, we said a woman should finish davening Shachris, meaning Shemona Esrei, by the 4th hour of the day, okay, which is safe Zman Tefillah on the calendar. But at the very least before Chatzos. And if she didn't, then it follows the same law as a man, that she can daven Mincha twice, do Tashlumin, but under no circumstances to say Psuka de Zimra and say Birchas Kriya Shema midday.
Which is
You have to look at a calendar. I mean, now it's, I think, 12:30, around that time. You have to look in the calendar when Chatzais is, if you can still say. Birchas at the Shachar Birchas that you can say the whole day. It's not a problem. This and also Taman you can say the whole day. This is and Shema, of course, you can say the whole day. This is just referring to Psuki de Zimra with brachas of Birchas
praises
and the brachas of Shema and Shemana Esrei of Shachris. That can't be done.
What about you like being a rabbi that could teach somebody that's not religious and that probably didn't say the blessing to learn Torah? So
we discussed that. So
I forgot.
We said that they can say it the whole day, even at night, and we said that if it's a good idea in Chabad houses when they do when they do shiurim, that they should have someone. They should have someone get up and say the bracha, or everyone should say the bracha.
That's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah. So wherever you go, if you ever end up participating in this type of shiur, it's a good suggestion to give. Yeah.
I'm curious, why do you have to say praising before? Why is that required? Not
before the time.
Yeah.
Because the general rules is that you can't say a blessing. You can't just make up a blessing. You can only say a blessing that the sages coined, and only in the time period they coined it for it to be said in. So Shachris is, it's a morning prayer. That's breakfast. Can a restaurant serve breakfast at 2:00 in the afternoon? It can't be called breakfast anymore, right? I think they even have rules. They don't can I order breakfast? No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah.
But what's wrong? Just make me eggs. No, that's the policy. We don't. It's not breakfast anymore. So it's the same thing. Shachris is God's breakfast. He's not waiting till 2:00 for you to give it to him. So the breakfast of Kol Shachris was initially instituted to be said and prayed until 12:30. It's the latest time. Mm-hmm. After that, it's already lunchtime. Mincha.
He's hungry again.
How you can do is you can do tashlumin. You can eat twice, right? You first do daven mincha, and then you go ahead and you do Shemana Esrei of Shachris. But to daven as if it's Shachris, that is a problem. Mm-hmm. There was a Chassidish Paisik, his name, he authored the sefer called the Mishmer Shalom. And he brought a lot of Chassidish and Hagim there that sort of, so to say, look like they're going against Halacha. And he got a lot of slack from a lot of people for justifying these, slips from the traditional halachic understanding. He got a lot of slack from the Misnagdisha community, but even from the Chassidish community, some of them gave him, he went way too far in trying to justify, and he should have just put his foot down. But specifically regarding his Zman Tefillah, even though he does discuss and give certain leeways, he basically says that even with all the justifications, there's no way I can justify a person's davening Shachris after Chatzais, even with all the halachic tricks I made available, because people won't know. First of all, he may not know all these halachic tricks of how to work it out, and people that see him doing this won't know, and therefore just everybody will start davening after Chatzais and trample on Zman. So even he, the most liberal, so to say, justifier of these customs, was not willing to give a stamp of approval.
I remember very, very holy rabbis doing tefillin very late.
So you can, the mitzvah putting on tefillin applies the whole day. Back in the day, people used to wear tefillin the whole day.
Okay.
But you do have very holy rabbis that even made daven Shachris after the time, and that's because they are very holy rabbis. So, God doesn't mind being served breakfast from them a little later. They are the best. You're such a great chef. I'll take your breakfast anytime that it's available. But a person who's making burnt toast and rotten eggs, Right. No, that's an analogy that's recorded. It's brought. There's a famous story with Rabbi Saul of Ruzhin at the Ruzhna. I'm trying to remember the details of which way it went. Regarding Zman Tefillah, there's a story with the Ruzhna regarding Zman Tefillah. Okay, I'm probably forgetting a few details, but the idea of it was that there was a chassid of the Ruzhna who would daven past the time. And the Ruzhner gave him over the head for it. And the person told the Ruzhner, but you yourself, what are you looking at me? Yeah. I have an example to learn from. So he gave him this. So he said, I want to tell you a mashal of if you came home from work and there was nothing ready to eat, you're starving, there's no dinner available, and you hear your wife, no, you're not allowed in the kitchen. It's a rule at home. No husband's allowed in the kitchen till dinner's ready. And you're not allowed in, and you hear a lot of noise and banging of pots, and you think, oh my gosh, she's preparing a whole, 5-course meal fit for a king. And in truth, you come very late, 3 hours after the time for dinner, you're starving. You sit in this lavish, beautiful meal. You don't even remember that you didn't eat for 3 hours. You're so happy. You're so indulged in all the food. You just come in and you say thank you and have an amazing time. That's what it says. But what would it be if you went in there and all you saw was burnt toast and a rotten egg? 3 hours later. This is Mashali told the Chassid. And then the Chassid, but the way the story goes, then the Chassid told the original something back. And that's the point I don't remember. And and then the original said, I didn't think about that point. The bottom line is that we see that even, there's the difference always given for the chief chefs versus just the simple people. Okay, so that was a summary regarding davening. We're not going to go through here. I know you don't have books by you, but I'll just mention anyways. We're on page 25, chapter 2, Halacha 4, in Rabbi Fuchs's book. And we're up to, so pretty much everything up to this page we already did in our course already, regarding the general rules of mitzvahs, ashes, non-grama, time-dependent mitzvahs, why women are potter, morning blessings, washing hands, and things of the like. So that we already took care of. Eating before prayer. Both men and women are forbidden to eat or drink before morning prayers. This restriction does not include water, tea, or coffee, even with sugar. A person who feels weak is permitted to eat and drink as necessary before prayer. Okay, so let me give a little clarification to this. In chapter 89 Shulchan Aruch, there is a very severe prohibition recorded against against eating before davening. Eating before davening is not just, I'll give it in perspective. It's in general, you're never allowed to have a meal before a mitzvah that you have to do, because we say you may become indulged in the meal and forget to do the mitzvah, right? It's like our mother taught us, don't push off today what you can do, don't push off for tomorrow what you can do today, right? Otherwise, it'll only get done tomorrow, and tomorrow again, you're going to do the same thing, so it'll never get done. So that's why, right, don't push off. So the same idea, don't first do what you have to do, then go ahead and have your meal. But this is much more severe. This not eating before davening prohibition. It's not just another one of those, don't eat a meal before prayer, before the mitzvah, because by then we have certain leniencies. You can snack, you can play around. There's different ways of getting out of it. But here, you're not eating anything. It's forbidden to eat. The reason is not because that we're afraid you're going to forget to daven, but rather because from halacha perspective, it's actually expounded from a pasuk that says. A person is not allowed to basically expound or eat on the blood. And there's different interpretations of what that means, that pasuk in scripture. And it's used to learn a number of different things, a number of different rabbinical prohibitions are learned from that pasuk. But one of them is you're not allowed to eat before davening. A person is not allowed to satiate himself, indulge in pleasures before he first gives thanks to God, before he first prays to Hashem. And it's considered that someone who does so is considered very severe, as if it's likened to murder, or like a vidazara. So it's something that in halacha is viewed as something very, very severe. And in Chassidus, it's actually given some background of understanding. It says the following: that why did God create humans with a necessity to eat? I mean, it would have been much simpler for just us not to have to eat, right? Imagine not having to eat. You can just live without eating. It'd be much simpler that way. And so God could have created us in that manner. The reason why he didn't is because he wanted us to do this avodah of rectifying and refining the foods that we eat. That, there's klippas and the sparks found in all the physical things. And by us eating, we are being involved in elevation. And that's why it says that the shulchan shel adam is mizbeach. The shulchan of a person mizbeach is just like the altar was used to elevate the animals, so to our eating tables used to elevate the food and where the food comes from, etc. Now, being that this whole spiritual avodah is taking place, and that's the whole reason why we as humans were created with the necessity of eating, therefore we can't do it before we pray, because before we pray it says it says before prayer, when a person wakes up, they wake up with their godly soul the godly soul left the body, the animal soul is around, and the godly soul will come back in, and it takes time for it to integrate, for it to be fully installed. It's a good computer term. Okay? Every morning, it's a new reinstallation of the soul, the godly soul. And until it's not fully installed, it's not working properly. So, what's the installation process? Davening chakras. When we daven Shachris, that finalizes the installation of the godly soul. Once the godly soul is in, we can now go to the battle. We can now go to the table and refine the foods. But before davening, we haven't yet installed the animals, the godly soul. What are you doing when you're eating? All you're doing is satiating the animal soul, and you don't have the ability to refine it. So that's why it's brought down in Kabbalah. This is brought in the Torah in a few places of why there's a prohibition against eating before davening.
But the Hayom Yom, for who was it?
Right, I'm not done. We're going to mention that. Yeah. This was just explaining the initial original halacha, okay? Which applies till today. This halacha, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't change, and therefore there is ideally a prohibition against eating before davening. And even according to that prohibition, however, you're allowed to drink water. It's become customary to even allow a tea or coffee. You have some very machmer that will have it without sugar. But even today, many people do it even with sugar. And all these atayim are based on what? What are all these atayim for? Well, water is clearly allowed because it's not considered a food of haughtiness. It's not like I'm not indulging in anything. It's water, for heaven's sake. There's no pleasure in water. It's just I'm thirsty. It's not like tea or coffee or sugar or all this stuff. So the one purpose of the basis of the allowance of extending the allowance to coffee and tea is basically saying, listen, I'm not having a meal, but I need some strength, I need some energy to be able to daven properly. And the halacha is the same halacha that says you're not allowed to eat. The sages decreed you're not allowed to eat before davening. It's very severe. They said that's only if you're not allowed to eat stam for the sake of eating. You're hungry, but if you need to eat in order for the sake of having concentration in prayer, then that is considered part of the prayer. That's another step in helping you pray. That's helping you being able to pray. I'm not eating for the sake of refining the food. I'm eating for the sake of being able to daven. And so that's allowed. And so therefore we have two cases allowed. A person's sick, it's allowed. Someone who's sick doesn't have any restriction. Or even someone who's not sick, but he feels hungry, and that hunger is going to prevent his concentration during prayer. Yeah. So this is what the heter is based on. And in Chabad, the tradition was to extend this heter even to be able to eat mezainis, and if necessary, even to wash on bread and have an actual meal. The Rebbe's father instructed the Rebbe, we have the letter, he told the Rebbe used to fast a lot. And would fast on every Monday and Thursday. The Rebbe was very interesting, as the Rebbe led a very different life than what he preached. Obviously, the Rebbe was on a very different level. But, the Rebbe always preached not to, like the Baal Shem Tov, not to belittle the body and not to cause suffering to the body, not to cause pain, and we don't do any more fast. But the Rebbe himself did a lot of self-afflictness to himself.
Used to not eat very much.
So the Rebbe's father knew about this, and the Rebbe's father instructed him, I am commanding you to wash on bread and have a meal before davening every single day. Now, as far as we know, the Rebbe didn't follow that instruction, as far as we know. But we do have that.
The Rebbe said that there's a Hayom Yom about it.
That's what the Rebbe said with the daughter of the Tzemach Tzedek. Correct. So that Hayom Yom, which says is that better to eat in order to daven and daven in order to eat, or to think about eating while you're davening, let's get out of the way. That halachically is based on this concept that you're allowed to. There's a permission to eat. I'm not eating because it tastes good. I'm not eating because I love ice cream. I'm eating in order to have concentration. So that is allowed, and that's traditionally done. However, this heter can be abused. Okay, the abuse comes when we think, oh, Chabad, we allow eating before davening. Chas v'shalom. God forbid. It's a law in Shulchan Aruch. We don't allow eating for davening. We allow eating for the sake of concentration. So what this means is as follows. Number one, if you're davening at a time that there's no need for you to eat, you're not hungry. Let's say someone's davening nates. They're not hungry. There's no hunger. Then they have no right. If they have delicious chocolate, they were waiting to stop being fleshik, to become milchik again, and wake up in the morning. Even doesn't matter what denomination you are. It's forbidden to indulge in. It's forbidden to eat it. Okay, because you're not eating for the sake of concentration and davening. It's only food that is being eaten for the sake of strengthening concentration and relieving hunger, so you can daven properly. That it is allowed. Which would mean as well that if you're eating, if you're eating something so you have concentration, it doesn't mean so now I can also have this and also have that and also have that. It's limited to what's necessary to what you need to have. So this is important. So the heter is not abused. When the heter is abused, it unfortunately causes a bad name to Chassidus, and it makes people say, "Oh, you see, they belittle Shulchan Aruch." And this is, of course, something that's very contrary to the will of our Rabbeim, that we need to spread the teachings of Chassidism to all Jews, and Chas V'Shalom shouldn't be tainted with an idea as if it defies Jewish law. Therefore, people do have to know that the halachas do apply, and it's limited to the allowance of preparation for davening. As we said, no difference between men and women in this. Women also have this. However, those women who are accustomed, as we discussed earlier in previous classes, not to daven a set prayer every day, they follow the opinion of the Rambam, that says women are exempt from Shemoneh Esrei. So they're so busy that even Shemoneh Esrei they don't even do the basics. So those women would only apply the prohibition to Birchas HaShachar. So until they say Birchas HaShachar, brachas, etc., then they would not be allowed to. Then they wouldn't eat unless for the sake of concentration. So if they're so hungry that they can't even concentrate on Baruch Hashem, then they will be able to eat to prepare for that.
The only thing is, it takes me so long to daven. I probably wouldn't be eating until
100%, we agree, especially Shabbos. It's applicable, So that's why we eat something. Yeah, so that if you need it for concentration, that's why. The question is on the opposite. I've had this debate with a lot of colleagues of mine that aren't Chassidim, aren't Chabad, and they always looked at it very strangely, like, how can you guys eat before davening? And always open up to the Shulchan Aruch. It's not just in the Alter Shulchan Aruch; it's in the Machaber Shulchan Aruch. So the question is not on us; the question is on you. Why are you not eating before davening when you're davening Shachar on Shabbos? I mean, you're finishing davening by 11 o'clock, 11:30. You got to be starving. So of course we're starving. So how do you not eat beforehand? It says that if you can't concentrate, you're allowed to eat and even should eat. So why aren't you eating? So it turns it around, the story, but nonetheless, again, this has to be limited only to those specific cases. Children below bar and bas mitzvah are allowed to eat before prayer. There is no restriction, and in general, it's good to know there's never eating restrictions to children below bar and bas mitzvah. They're always allowed to eat and drink whenever they wish, even on Yom Kippur. Well, we'll leave Yom Kippur for another time, but even on Yom Kippur, practically, children below bar bas mitzvah are not chayav to fast, and certainly they don't have a restriction against eating and drinking before Havdalah, before Kiddush. They are allowed to eat before Kiddush, and the Alter Rebbe goes as far and writes that it's forbidden to oppress them and prevent them from being allowed to eat or drink so long as they're below bar bas mitzvah. A lot of people don't know this, and they oppress, you can oppress a 6-7-year-old child. No, you have to wait for Tati to come home to make Kiddush. It's against Halacha. It's just ignorance. There's no such thing. If the child knows that there's a concept of not eating and drinking until Kiddush, and he wants to accept upon himself this act of piety, so there's a heter that has basis and precedent that the parent doesn't have to protest it. The parent doesn't have to say, no, I'm going to force feed you. Good. Also with a fast, even though children are not chayiv to fast, and it's forbidden to force them to fast rabbinical fasts. Nonetheless, if they decide to do so, if they want to do so, we don't have an obligation to stop them unless one of two things. Number one, we assess it's detrimental for their health, and of course we have to stop them. Or two, we see they're getting into a lot of fights. They're irritated because they haven't been eating, so they're just making a lot of problems. So what you're doing an act of piety on expense of everyone else in the family. So that's not called an act of piety. That's called an act of self-service. So in any event, it's misguided piety. So, but outside of those cases, of course, a child has the right, especially before bar mitzvah, they want to really get used to it before bar mitzvah. Why we can't, so what I tell my children is that I tell them, I can't tell you can't eat, you can eat, but since it's before your bar mitzvah, it's a good thing for you ready to get used to it, but it's your decision, it's your decision to, until bar mitzvah, minadin, that you're allowed to eat, and if they're hungry, we can't tell them not to. So the same thing with probably before prayer, the issur of eating and drinking does not apply to them. A person is to designate, next halacha 8, it is proper to designate a fixed place in the home for prayer. So we have recorded in the Gemara, in the name of Rishim Bar Yochai, Rabbi Yochanan, it says the name of Rishim Bar Yochai as well, other Talmudic sources brought in the Shulchan Aruch, that every person should have a set fixed place for davening, which means within 4 amas. It doesn't have to be the exact symmetric area, you measure it exactly, but within 4 amma radius, 6.4 square, 6.4 feet square.
What's the reason for that?
The reason for it, okay, is the following. It's learned from a pasuk regarding Avram Avinu that says Avram Avinu went and prayed for stone. He went to a set area and prayed. And it says that when a person sets an area to pray, God listens to his prayer more. It's similar, like, the mashal where, the king is already used to this guy. He already knows, oh, this is this individual. He already knows what's going on. It's not a newcomer coming for the first time to apply for godly assistance, godly welfare. He's been here before. He's been to this place. So that's the Balabashtik explanation. In Kabbalah, what's explained is as following: that whenever we pray, we sanctify and elevate the area. So instead of having to restart and rebuild from scratch every day's prayer, so we daven in a place which was already davened in before and already has that sanctification, and it's listened to. The prayers are accepted above much easier. It's similar to someone who's trying to get to a location. Now you have a choice of either taking the same roads you're used to taking, which may be a little boring, or going through a new road. I mean, make it lost, and you may never get there, or it may take a really long time to get there. So too spiritually, the area has been refined. You have a clear ladder up to heaven, hopefully, in this area. While to go to a different spot, you're starting from scratch to get rid of all the klippas there, and hopefully your prayers grow up. That's the reason that's brought to the person, is to designate a set place. This is in home and in shul. If you go to shul after every Shabbos, you should try to have a set place that you daven in that area.
Oh, wow.
Now, on the other hand, we should emphasize, and that's where we have seats that are sold, right? Sell seats, and by buying a seat, you fulfill this mitzvah. Hopefully you fill this mitzvah. Now, unfortunately, it happens sometimes that someone else knowingly or unknowingly takes your seat. So what do you do? In that case, we said already, you have a 4 amma radius. So you can sit next to them or within the 4 ammas is also okay. You should try. Right. Listen, usually, sometimes, a person can just go and say, listen, this is my set seat. Do you mind getting up? Sometimes it's not a problem. And sometimes some people are not, everyone's built of a different makeup. And sometimes people take that very offensively for some strange reason. I mean, if I paid for the seat, for the year, I mean, this is a set seat. It is common practice in many shuls, and they even have names on them. And because of that, what's menshlich is for someone, I don't know what happened on the woman's side. I'm talking about the men's side. The women's side don't have a woman gabbai usually, but in the men's side, what's mentioned for guests to do is they go over to the gabbai and they ask them, listen, where are seats that I can sit on? But people that just go in as if they own the place. I'm a guest, and they can sit wherever they want, and then someone has to then get into this uncomfortable position. It's not very derech eretz to do such a thing. And people already know that there are sets. People do buy seats and have set seats that they daven, and you're supposed to have a set seat. This is where your comfortable spot is. This is where your fixed place. Unfortunately, but on the other hand, of course, if push comes to shove, it's not an issue. It's not a matter to make a machlekes over or a fight over. And so, if someone has to sit somewhere else for that time, that's there's nothing wrong with that. Rather than get into an argument. A lot of shul fights. A lot of shul fights happen because of seats, and that's one of the reasons why they have a rabbi. He's the referee. Yeah. Honestly, a lot of shuls,
It's like Albanat Panim, if you ask somebody to ask for your claim.
What's that?
Albanat Panim, like embarrassing people.
Why is it embarrassing? I mean, I purchase a seat. Why is it Albanat Panim? Listen, a person who doesn't feel comfortable, there's no chiyuv. Please sit next to them, sit somewhere else, or even ignore it. That's fine. You don't have an obligation to tell them to get up. I'm saying, is it accepted to ask them to get, to let them know? So some people do it, some people don't do it because they feel uncomfortable. But let's put it this way: someone who didn't have the chachma, the wisdom to verify or check out before they sat down, is maybe someone you don't want to mention it to anyway. So so you just let it go.
So if you sat in somebody's space, right? Because you said it has a kedusha, so are you gonna have some of the kedusha from the other person by standing?
Yeah, but don't forget, every person has their own klippas they bring with them.
Oh, so you'll also have the same.
It's like you going the same road they're going, but you're going with your broken down, 50-year-old Beetle, Volkswagen, and he's going with his, Porsche. Yeah. So it doesn't really help so much.
Okay.
Especially if he's upset.
Yeah, that's true.
This is the Chassam Sofer had a very interesting tshuva regarding stealing the podium. Who's going to lead the prayers as chazan? A lot of times it's a very contentious position because different people have chiyuvim. This person's father passed away. This person's father passed away. And if there's only one only one minion. So what do you do? If you can make 2 minyan, make 2 minyan. Only 1 minion. What do you do? So there's rules. There's halachas about who gets to say first. And it used to be, today this is extinct, but it used to be also kaddish can only be said by one person. Can you imagine if 2 people have a yahrzeit that day and one of them can't say kaddish?
Why?
Can you imagine the fury, the anger, that used to be only one person can say kaddish.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how all Jewry did for hundreds of years.
Wow.
Okay, until not too long ago. Today, for peace purposes, we just gave up on the whole system. Said, guys, everyone do it. That's it. We're out of this. The rabbi said, we're out of the system. We're no longer refereeing these fights. We're out.
Wow.
But regarding davening for the Amud, what are you going to do? 3 chazanim. 3 chazanim at the same time. What are you going to do? So there's no choice. So there, we still have to have these laws. And sometimes it happens that you have a person who's not a very God-fearing or intellectual individual, and he pushes and bullies his way to the Amud, even though according to Halacha, it doesn't belong to him. It doesn't belong to him. But for example, I'll give an example. You have someone who, this is a set minion, he davens the whole year, his father passed away or mother passed away, davens for 11 months, and in came another community member who had just lost his relative within 30 days. And he's within, so technically according to Allah, someone within Shleishim pushes off someone with. So what's done in these situations is, menschlichkeit is that he gets his own minion. He doesn't push on his friend's minion. But if push came to shove, if he wasn't able to, technically he has a din kadima. He has a precedence. So if this guy still bullies his way in and davens for the Amud, it says the Chassam Sofer that his prayers go to the other person's father.
Whoa.
Some Sefer says it doesn't help. He says that anyone who steals someone else's position, then you're not getting any advantageous prayer for your relative. It's going to the other. All merits reserved to the other relative. That's how he said you're not gaining anything by stealing the podium. Anyways, we'll continue with Shem next week. Thank you very much. Have a great
Thank
week.
you so much.